Hey there, fellow night owls and insomniacs. Welcome to tonight's story. Before we begin, if you're new here, I create these tales to help you drift off into dreamland while giving you just enough spine tingles to keep things interesting. If you enjoy tonight's story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and leave a comment about what you thought. Have you ever seen something moving in the corner of your eye, something that vanishes when you turn to look? Well, after hearing this story, you might think twice about what those shadows really are. And now, our story begins. I've always been the type of person who notices things others don't. Small details, subtle changes, the way light falls across a room. That's probably why I spotted them first. The day had been ordinary enough. I'd finished my shift at Martin's bookstore in downtown Portland, where I'd worked since graduating college 3 years ago. It wasn't my dream job, but it paid the bills while I worked on my novel at night. Besides, I loved being surrounded by books all day, breathing in that particular scent of paper and possibility. It was late October, and the sun was already setting by the time I locked up the shop at 7 p.m. The streets were busy with people hurrying home, their breaths creating small clouds in the crisp autumn air. I pulled my navy blue cardigan tighter around my shoulders and started the 15-minute walk to my apartment. That's when I first noticed it. A flicker of movement in my peripheral vision. Something dark and quick like a cat darting between cars. I turned my head, but there was nothing there. Just the usual street scene. Headlights, storefront displays, people with shopping bags. Getting jumpy, Ellie, I muttered to myself, continuing my walk. My apartment was in one of those old converted Victorian houses, divided into 6 units. Mine was on the 2nd floor, with large bay windows that overlooked a small neighborhood park. Nothing fancy, but it was home. I stopped at Gino's Deli on the corner of my block to grab a sandwich for dinner. Mr. Gino himself was behind the counter, his round face breaking into a smile when he saw me. "Ellie, the usual tonight?" "Yes, please." I smiled back. "Turkey on wheat, extra pickles." As he prepared my sandwich, I browsed the small grocery section. That's when I saw it again. A shadow, distinctly person-shaped, reflected in the glass refrigerator door. It stood right behind me, tall and oddly still. I spun around so fast I almost lost my balance. Nothing. Just the empty aisle. Mr. Gino looked up. "You okay there, kiddo?" "Yeah, I thought I saw someone." He glanced around the empty store and chuckled. "Just us tonight. Must be those ghost stories you're always reading getting to you." I forced a laugh. Probably. After paying for my sandwich, I hurried the rest of the way home. The streets seemed darker somehow, the spaces between street lamps stretching longer. I kept my eyes forward, ignoring the urge to check over my shoulder every few seconds. My building's entrance had never looked so welcoming. I fumbled with my keys, feeling an irrational surge of relief when I stepped into the well-lit lobby. Mrs. Rodriguez from apartment 1A was collecting her mail. She waved at me, her bangles jingling. "Evening, Ellie. Cold one out there tonight, isn't it?" Getting there," I agreed, checking my own mailbox. Bills, advertisements, and a postcard from my parents who were touring the Southwest in their newly purchased RV. Their retirement dream come true. As I climbed the stairs to the 2nd floor, I felt watched. The feeling was so intense I stopped midway and looked back down. The lobby was empty now, Mrs. Rodriguez gone. But there, at the bottom of the stairs, was a shadow. A dark silhouette that didn't match any object in the lobby. I blinked, and it was gone. My heart thumped harder against my ribs. I took the remaining stairs 2 at a time, practically running down the hallway to my apartment, number 2C. Once inside, I locked the door, then checked the deadbolt twice. "Get a grip," I told myself, flicking on lights as I moved through my small apartment. "You're being ridiculous." I set my sandwich on the kitchen counter and went to the bathroom to wash my hands. In the mirror, my reflection looked pale, my brown eyes wider than usual. My dark hair was coming loose from its ponytail, wisps framing my face. I splashed cold water on my cheeks, trying to shake off the weird feeling that had followed me home. But when I reached for the towel and looked up again, I froze. There was someone standing in the doorway behind me. At least, that's what my mind registered in that first terrible second. But when I whirled around, heart in my throat, there was nothing there. Just the empty hallway. I stood there, trembling slightly, water dripping from my face onto my collar. My bathroom wasn't large, just a sink, toilet, and shower stall. Nowhere for anyone to hide. And yet, the shadow I'd seen had been distinct, person-shaped, standing perfectly still, watching me. I took a deep breath and walked through my entire apartment, checking closets, looking under the bed, behind the couch. Everything was normal. No intruders, no explanation for what I'd seen. "You're tired," I said aloud, my voice sounding too loud in the quiet apartment. "Just tired and letting your imagination run wild." I ate my sandwich while watching reruns of Friends on my laptop, trying to fill the apartment with familiar voices, but I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. Every now and then I'd catch a flicker of movement from the corner of my eye, near the bookshelf, by the window, in the kitchen doorway. Each time I looked, there was nothing there. Just ordinary shadows cast by ordinary objects. By 10 o'clock, I was exhausted. Not physically. I hadn't done anything particularly strenuous that day, but mentally. The constant alertness, the adrenaline spikes every time I thought I saw something move, had worn me out. I got ready for bed, brushing my teeth while carefully avoiding looking at the bathroom doorway and the mirror. I changed into flannel pajamas. It was getting cold at night now, and climbed into bed with my current read, a mystery novel I'd borrowed from the bookstore. I managed about 3 pages before my eyes started to drift closed. I set the book aside, turned off the lamp, and snuggled down under the comforter. Despite the lingering unease, exhaustion pulled me quickly toward sleep. Just as I was drifting off, hovering in that hazy space between wakefulness and dreams, I heard it. A soft sound, like the whisper of fabric against fabric, like someone moving very carefully, trying not to be heard. My eyes flew open. The room was dark except for the faint glow of streetlights filtering through my curtains. For a moment, I saw nothing unusual. Then my eyes adjusted, and I realized I wasn't alone. They stood at the foot of my bed, 3 of them. Shadow people, just as dark as the night itself, but somehow darker, their edges defined against the gloom of my bedroom. They had no features I could discern, no faces, no clothing details, just human-shaped silhouettes. They were perfectly still, watching me. I couldn't move, couldn't scream, could barely breathe. 1 second passed, 2, 3. I blinked, and they were gone. I sat bolt upright, fumbling for the lamp, my heart racing so fast I felt dizzy. Light flooded the room, revealing nothing. Just my familiar bedroom, everything in its place. Sleep paralysis, I told myself. That's all it was. A common phenomenon, especially when you're stressed or overtired. Your mind wakes up before your body, creating hallucinations. That's all. But even as I repeated this logical explanation to myself, I knew that wasn't it. I hadn't been paralyzed at all. I had been fully awake, and they had been there, standing at the foot of my bed, watching me. I kept the light on for the rest of the night. Morning came with blessed normality. Sunlight streamed through my windows. Birds chirped in the park across the street, and my coffee maker gurgled cheerfully in the kitchen. In the light of day, last night's terror seemed almost silly. Almost. As I got ready for work, I found myself avoiding looking too long at corners or doorways. I kept the radio on, filling the apartment with the morning DJ's cheerful banter and top 40 hits. Normal sounds. Real sounds. My phone chimed with a text from my best friend, Melissa. "Still on for dinner tonight?" That new Thai place on 5th. I hesitated. What I really wanted was to come straight home after work, triple-check all my locks, and maybe sleep with the lights on again. But that was the path to becoming a hermit, I knew. Whatever had happened last night, stress, an overactive imagination, or something else, I couldn't let it control my life. Absolutely, I texted back. 7:30? Perfect, came the reply, along with a string of food emojis. Work was busy, which was a blessing. The bookstore had received a large shipment, and I spent most of the day unpacking boxes, checking inventory, and shelving new releases. Physical labor kept my hands busy and my mind occupied. During my lunch break, I couldn't resist looking up shadow people on my phone. The search results made my stomach tighten. Apparently, shadow people were a documented phenomenon. People all over the world reported seeing human-shaped shadows that moved independently, often appearing in peripheral vision. Some believed they were interdimensional beings. Others thought they were manifestations of negative energy. A few websites claimed they were harbingers of death. That last one I quickly scrolled past. Most scientific explanations pointed to optical illusions, sleep paralysis, or neurological misfires. Nothing supernatural, just the brain interpreting visual information incorrectly. That explanation should have comforted me, but somehow it didn't. Because scientific explanations couldn't account for the feeling that had accompanied the sightings. That prickling sense of being watched. The absolute certainty that whatever these shadows were, they were aware, conscious, focused on me. By closing time, I'd almost convinced myself that I'd imagined the whole thing. The power of suggestion was strong, and I'd been reading a lot of horror novels lately. My brain had simply manufactured a scary experience based on material it had absorbed. That rational explanation lasted exactly as long as it took me to lock the front door of the bookstore and turn around. There, across the street, standing perfectly still among the bustling pedestrians, was a shadow figure, watching me. I knew it was watching me, though it had no eyes I could see. I froze, key still in the door. The shadow remained motionless while people walked past it, through it, seemingly unaware of its presence. A bus passed, blocking my view for a moment. When it was gone, so was the shadow. My hands were shaking as I texted Melissa. Can we meet at 7 instead, and maybe grab a drink before dinner? I needed a drink, and company. Lots of company and bright lights. Sure thing, she replied. Everything okay? Fine, I lied, just hungry early. I didn't take my usual route home. Instead, I walked up to Fifth Avenue, where there were more people and brighter storefronts. I kept to the middle of the sidewalk, away from alleyways and darkened doorways. Every few steps I checked over my shoulder, earning curious glances from other pedestrians. The Thai restaurant was called Bangkok Smile. Its windows steamed up from the heat inside, a small bell jingling as I pushed open the door. The hostess greeted me with a warm smile. Just one? Meeting a friend, I said, scanning the room. She's not here yet. Could I sit at the bar while I wait? Of course. The bar area was well lit and already half full with the after-work crowd. I took a seat that gave me a view of both the entrance and the entire restaurant. The bartender, a young man with a neat beard and forearm tattoos, placed a cocktail menu in front of me. What can I get you? Vodka tonic, please, double. He raised an eyebrow but nodded. Rough day? You could say that. While he prepared my drink, I kept my eyes on the restaurant's entrance, trying to appear casual as I checked each person who came in. None of them were shadow people, thankfully. Just ordinary Portlanders looking for dinner. The vodka helped. By the time Melissa arrived, the edges of my anxiety had softened slightly. She slid onto the stool next to me, her curly red hair bouncing around her shoulders. Well, you look like hell, she said by way of greeting, never one to mince words. Thanks, you look great too. She studied my face. Seriously, what's up? You're pale as a ghost." I toyed with my empty glass, debating how much to tell her. Melissa and I had been friends since college, and she'd stood by me through breakups, job losses, and my parents' move across the country, but this would sound crazy. "I haven't been sleeping well," I said finally, "just weird dreams." She didn't look convinced, but signaled the bartender for a glass of wine and didn't press further. That was one of the things I loved about Melissa. She knew when to push and when to let things breathe. "Well, you're in luck," she said instead. "I have the most mind-numbing office gossip to distract you with. You won't believe what Trevor from accounting did at the company picnic. Dinner was good. The food was spicy and flavorful, the restaurant warm and crowded, and Melissa's stories about her coworkers were genuinely funny. For a while, I almost forgot about shadow people and the feeling of being watched. Almost. Because twice during dinner I saw them. Once, standing by the restrooms, a dark figure that didn't move when others walked past. The second time, outside the window, a silhouette that remained stationary while pedestrians flowed around it like water around a rock. Each time they vanished when I blinked or looked away for a second. Each time, my heart rate spiked, my palms grew sweaty, and it took all my willpower not to react visibly. Melissa noticed anyway. "Okay, what's going on? You keep zoning out and then looking like you've seen a ghost." I took a deep breath and decided to trust her with a portion of the truth. "I think someone might be following me." Her expression shifted from concern to alarm. "What? Who? Have you called the police?" "No, it's not." I struggled to find words that wouldn't sound completely unhinged. "It's probably nothing. Just a feeling I've had, like someone's watching me." "That's not nothing, Elle, especially for a woman living alone. Your gut is telling you something. You should listen to it." I know, I'm being careful, staying in public places, keeping my doors locked." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You can stay at my place tonight if you want. Pete's away on that fishing trip with his brothers, so I've got the whole place to myself anyway." The offer was tempting. So tempting. But something told me it wouldn't matter where I slept. They had found me, and they would follow. "Thanks, but I'll be okay, really." After dinner, Melissa insisted on getting an Uber with me to my apartment building. She'd had wine with the dinner, so she couldn't drive, but she wasn't about to let me go home alone. "Text me when you're inside," she said as the car pulled up to my building. "And call me if anything feels off. I don't care what time it is." "I will. Thanks, Mel." That night, I had another encounter with the shadow people. This time, dozens of them lined my bedroom walls at 3:17 a.m. When one approached my bed and pointed at me, I screamed myself awake. The next day, I called in sick to work and headed to the Portland Central Library to research shadow people. What I learned was disturbing. Shadow figures appeared in folklore across cultures and throughout history, from Native American spirit walkers to Japanese kage-onna to Egyptian dwellers in the dark. Most troubling were accounts of people who had been followed by these entities before experiencing tragedy or danger. A note I found slipped between the pages of one book read, "They are drawn to fear. The more afraid you are, the stronger they become. Don't feed them." As I was leaving the library, I saw another shadow figure standing between bookshelves pointing at me. This time, instead of running, I followed my instincts and visited a nearby New Age shop called Mystic Pathways. The owner, Ruth, invited me for tea when I asked about shadow people. "They exist in the space between worlds," she explained. "Some cultures believe they're messengers, bringing warnings of danger or change. Others say they're negative entities that feed on fear." "How do I make them stop?" I asked. "The most consistent advice is to acknowledge them without feeding them your fear," Ruth said. "Fear is nourishing to many non-physical entities. The more afraid you are, the more they're drawn to you." She gave me herbs for purification, a black candle, a clear crystal, and a book about metaphysical protection. Just promise you'll come back and tell me how it goes. That evening, I performed the purification ritual, burning herbs in every room while stating, "This is my space, my home, only positive energy is welcome here." After lighting the black candle, I settled on the couch with Ruth's book. I must have dozed off because I jerked awake to find shadow figures standing along my living room walls, watching me with their non-existent eyes. I took a deep breath, remembering Ruth's advice. "I see you," I said aloud. "I acknowledge your presence, but I am not afraid of you." One shadow moved then, detaching from the wall and gliding toward me. We faced each other in silence until it slowly raised one arm and pointed not at me, but at the book that had fallen to the floor. The book had opened to a page about shadow people as messengers or harbingers. "Is that it?" I asked. "Are you trying to warn me about something?" The shadow moved again, this time pointing to a framed photo of my parents in their RV. My parents? Is something wrong with my parents? I tried calling both their phones but only got voicemail. As my concern grew, another shadow pointed to my laptop. A third shadow approached the front door, making a walking motion with its arms. I understood. They wanted me to help my parents. I searched for news from the Grand Canyon area, where my parents were traveling. The top result made my blood run cold. Flash flood warning issued for Grand Canyon National Park. I immediately called the park's emergency line, describing my parents' distinctive RV dark blue with a painted desert landscape on the sides and Oregon plates. The ranger promised to search for them. Hours later, my phone rang. "Ellie, honey, we just got your messages," my mother said. "The rangers found us about an hour ago. We were camping in a wash that's expected to flood by morning." "You're okay?" Relief washed over me. "We're fine. They helped us move the RV to higher ground." "How did you know?" "Just a feeling," I said, looking at the shadow figures still standing silently along my walls. After hanging up, I turned to them. "Thank you. I understand now. You were trying to help." One by one, the shadows began to fade away. The last one, the shadow that had pointed to my parents' photo, raised a hand in what seemed like farewell before disappearing. The fear that had gripped me for days was gone, replaced by wonder. They hadn't been haunting me, they'd been trying to warn me. The next day, I visited Ruth to tell her what happened. "Messengers," she nodded. "That's one of the oldest beliefs about shadow people. But why me? Why not appear to my parents directly?" Ruth smiled. "Maybe they tried, and your parents couldn't see them. Or maybe you were the one who needed to see them, to understand something about reality that most people never glimpse." I thought about that as I walked home. The veil between worlds might be thinner than most of us realized. There might be entities moving among us that we rarely perceive, trying in their alien way to communicate across the divide that separates their reality from ours. Inside my apartment, I placed Ruth's crystal on my bedside table. Not that I expected the shadow people to return. Their message had been delivered, their purpose fulfilled, but the experience had opened my mind to possibilities I'd never considered before. That night, as I settled into bed, I found myself glancing occasionally at the darkened corners of my room, not with dread, but with a strange sort of gratitude. "Thank you," I whispered into the empty air, "for helping me save them." There was no response, but I hadn't expected one. The shadows had returned to being just shadows for now, but sometimes, from the corner of my eye, I still catch glimpses of movement in the darkness. And now, instead of fear, I feel recognition, acknowledgement, perhaps even a hint of connection. The shadow people had followed me home. And in doing so, they'd led me to a truth I might otherwise never have discovered, that sometimes what lurks in the darkness isn't something to fear, but something trying desperately to communicate, to help. to connect across the boundaries that separate their world from ours. All we need to do is listen and watch the shadows. Hey folks, hope that story gave you the perfect balance of spine tingles and coziness for your bedtime listening. If you enjoyed The Night the Shadow People Followed Me Home, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss a new story. Have you ever experienced something strange out of the corner of your eye? Do you think shadow people might be messengers rather than malevolent entities? Let me know in the comments below. And if you've got ideas for future stories you'd like me to tell, drop those too. Until next time, sleep tight, and maybe leave a little night light on. Sweet dreams. Story number 2. Have you ever witnessed something so unexplainable that it haunts your dreams? Something that defies everything you thought you knew about reality? I've kept this story to myself for years, afraid of what people might think. But I can't keep it bottled up anymore. If you're listening to this right now, I need you to know this really happened to me. And the scariest part? It could happen to you too. So, get comfortable, but not too comfortable. And if you think you hear something strange while listening to this story, well, maybe check those dark corners of your room. Just to be safe. Let me know in the comments if anything like this has ever happened to you. And if you want to hear more of my experiences, make sure to subscribe. Trust me, this is just the beginning. The story starts now. The vanishing happened on a Tuesday night in October, just outside of Burlington, Vermont. I remember because Tuesdays were always my late nights at Miller's Corner Store where I worked the closing shift. It was unusually warm for fall, that kind of Indian summer that tricks you into thinking winter isn't coming. I've always been a rational person. I don't believe in ghosts. I'm the friend who explains away strange sounds and finds the logical reason behind every urban legend. At least, I was that person. Until that night. My shift ended at 11 p.m., and I was looking forward to the quiet 20-minute walk home along Maple Creek Road. It was a route I'd taken hundreds of times, past the old Westfield High School, through the small wooded area that separated the commercial district from my neighborhood. "Night, Kevin," my manager Denise called as I pushed through the glass doors. "Drive safe." "Walking tonight," I replied, zipping up my light jacket. Too nice to waste the gas. The parking lot was nearly empty. The streetlights cast long shadows across the asphalt, and the moon hung heavy in the sky. I put in my earbuds and started my usual true crime podcast. I was about 10 minutes into my walk when I first noticed him. A man walking on the opposite side of the street, moving in the same direction as me. There was nothing particularly unusual about him. Average height, wearing jeans and a dark jacket. Just another person out for a late-night walk. But something made me pause my podcast. Maybe it was because he seemed to be matching my pace exactly, step for step. I slowed down. He slowed down. I quickened my pace. So did he. When I reached the intersection where I would normally turn left, I decided to cross the street instead. It would give me a better look at the stranger's face under the streetlight. As I crossed, I glanced over my shoulder. He had stopped walking. He was just standing there watching me. And now that he was directly under a streetlight, I could see his face clearly for the first time. Or rather, I couldn't. His features seemed to shift and blur, as if I was looking at him through warped glass or flowing water. It wasn't a mask. It wasn't a trick of the light. It was as if his face couldn't decide what it wanted to be. The man tilted his head, a gesture that seemed both curious and predatory. Then he raised his hand slowly and waved at me. That simple gesture, so normal yet so wrong in that moment, sent ice through my veins. I turned and walked faster, the podcast still playing in one ear, the host calmly discussing how people can seemingly vanish into thin air. When I reached the edge of the wooded area that I normally cut through to get home, I hesitated. During the day, it was just a pleasant shortcut. At night, with its dense shadows, It suddenly seemed like the worst possible place to go. I glanced back. The man was following me again, his pace steady, unhurried, as if he knew exactly where I was going. I made a split-second decision and kept walking straight instead of turning onto the path. My phone vibrated in my pocket. A text message from an unknown number. "Why are you going the long way home, Kevin?" I nearly dropped the phone. How did they know my name? How did they know my route? Another text appeared below the first. "The woods are so much quicker. I'll meet you there." I shoved the phone back in my pocket and began to run. I rounded the corner onto Oak Street, my neighborhood finally in sight, and almost ran straight into her. A woman stood directly in my path wearing a light sundress despite the cool evening. Her hair was long and dark, obscuring her face as she looked down at the ground. "Excuse me," I said, moving to step around her, every instinct screaming at me to keep moving. That's when she lifted her head. Her face was wrong. Not blurred like the man's had been, but somehow incomplete. As if certain features were still being rendered. Her eyes were there, then not there, then there again, but in the wrong position. Her mouth opened, but there was only darkness inside. "Kevin," she said, her voice coming from everywhere and nowhere at once, "don't you recognize me?" She took a step toward me, her movements jerky and unnatural. "I've been waiting for you to notice me, to really see me." "What do you want?" I finally managed to ask. She cocked her head at an impossible angle. "To show you something most people never get to see." As I backed away, I caught a glimpse of something over the woman's shoulder. The man was there at the far end of my street, standing perfectly still, watching. I was trapped between them. My phone vibrated again. "Look closer, Kevin. See what's really there." As I read the message, the streetlight above the woman flickered, plunging us momentarily into darkness. When it came back on a second later, she was gone. In her place stood my neighbor, Mrs. Collins, an elderly woman who had lived across the street from me for years. "Kevin, dear, what are you doing out so late?" she asked, her voice normal, her face normal. I stared at her, unable to process what had just happened. Had I imagined the woman in the sundress? "Mrs. Collins," I said shakily, have you been standing here long?" She looked confused. "I was just letting Rusty out for his last potty break of the night." She gestured to her small terrier. "Are you all right, dear? You look like you've seen a ghost." I glanced down the street again. The man was gone too. "I'm fine," I lied. "Just tired after my shift. I should get home." Once inside, I locked every door and window and turned on every light. My phone buzzed again. "Sweet dreams, Kevin. We'll see you again soon." Sleep was out of the question. I spent the night on the couch, jumping at every creak of my house settling. I told myself there were logical explanations. Stress, exhaustion, an overactive imagination. But deep down I knew something impossible had happened on my walk home. And whatever it was, it knew my name. It knew where I lived. And it said it would see me again soon. I spent the next day researching. Hallucinations, stress responses, sleep deprivation. Nothing explained what I had experienced. By late afternoon, I was restless and needed to get out of the house. I decided to walk to Riverside Park, a place that always calmed me. I found a bench overlooking the water and sat down. I must have sat there for nearly an hour when I noticed a man sitting on a bench about 50 yards away. He was facing the river, his back to me, but something about his posture made the hair on my neck stand up. He was too still. While everyone else in the park moved, this man sat as motionless as a statue. As if sensing my attention, he slowly turned his head to look over his shoulder. I couldn't make out his features clearly at this distance, but I didn't need to. I knew. And I was suddenly certain that he had been there the entire time, waiting for me to notice him. I stood up quickly and walked briskly toward the parking lot. I glanced back. The man was gone from the bench. Instead, he was on the path behind me, walking at the same unhurried pace as the night before. Close enough now that I could see his face, or rather, the absence of a definite face. It shifted and blurred just as it had done before. I walked faster. A young couple passed right by him, laughing at some private joke, not even glancing his way. Could no one else see what I saw? I reached my car and drove straight to my friend Mike's apartment. If anyone could help me make sense of what was happening, it would be him. I told him everything: the man on my walk home, the shifting face, the woman who became Mrs. Collins, the texts, the man at the park. I showed him the messages on my phone as proof. "You think I'm crazy," I said when I finished. Mike shook his head. "No, I think something's happening that I don't understand, but I don't think you're crazy." His validation nearly brought tears to my eyes. I hadn't realized how desperately I needed someone to believe me. Mike insisted I stay the night. Despite my exhaustion, sleep eluded me. When I finally did drift off, it was into uneasy dreams filled with blurred faces and wrong angles. I was awakened by my phone vibrating. A call from an unknown number. "Hello?" I whispered. "Look outside," a voice responded. It was neither male nor female, neither young nor old. I moved toward Mike's bedroom door to wake him. "Your friend can't help you, Kevin," the voice said. "He's dreaming now. The kind of dreams you don't come back from." I threw open Mike's door. His bed was empty. "Where is he?" I demanded. "Look outside," the voice repeated. Then the call ended. In the parking lot below stood Mike. He was in his pajamas, barefoot on the cold asphalt. Next to him was the faceless man, and on his other side, the woman with the incomplete features. Mike's expression was blank, his eyes open but unseeing. I ran downstairs, but by the time I reached the parking lot, it was empty. No Mike, no faceless figures. My phone vibrated, a text message. He saw too much. "Through you. We had to take him." I called the police, of course. They took my statement but found no signs of forced entry, no evidence of foul play. Just a missing man who had apparently walked out of his apartment in the middle of the night. Days passed. Mike was still missing. I couldn't stay in one place. I felt watched, hunted, so I drove. For hours, in random directions. On the fourth day, exhaustion led me to a small roadside diner. I was staring blankly at the menu when someone slid into the booth across from me. "You look like you could use more than coffee," said a young woman with short brown hair and glasses. "Do I know you?" I asked warily. "No, but I know what's happening to you." She lowered her voice. The shifting faces, the messages, the feeling that reality itself is flexible. My heart began to race. "Who are you?" "My name's Ellie. I'm like you, someone who can see them. The faders, I call them. Entities that exist in the spaces between what we think of as reality." "My friend disappeared," I told her. Ellie's expression grew pained. "I'm sorry. It happens sometimes, when someone sees too much too quickly." "But why? What do these faders want?" "I don't know their ultimate goal, but I think they're preparing for something. Some kind of shift." She reached into her bag and pulled out a small notebook filled with sketches of faces that looked disturbingly familiar. "There are others like us," she continued. "People who've noticed them. We meet to share information, to try to understand what's happening." "How do I know I can trust you?" I asked bluntly. She rolled up her sleeve, revealing a small tattoo on her inner wrist, a design of interlocking circles. "This is how we identify each other. The Watchers, we call ourselves. If you want," she continued, "I can take you to meet the others. Tonight, safety in numbers." "Okay," I said finally. "Where and when?" "There's an old bookstore on Maple Street, 8 o'clock. She wrote down the address. "And Kevin, try not to look too closely at anything that seems off. The more you see, the more they can see you. At 7:45, I stood outside Dusty Cover's bookstore. The door opened to reveal a heavyset man with a salt and pepper beard. "Ellie vouched for you. Come in, quickly." Inside, about a dozen people sat in a circle of chairs. Ellie greeted me with a smile. "You made it." As I began to tell my story to the group, the lights in the bookstore flickered, then went out completely. When the emergency lights came on, we all saw it at the same time. The back wall of the bookstore was gone. In its place was a void filled with shapes that made no sense to the human eye. And standing at the threshold between our reality and that impossible void were figures. Dozens of them. Human-shaped, but wrong in fundamental ways. Faces that shifted and blurred. Limbs that bent at impossible angles. Leading them was the faceless man who had followed me home that first night. And beside him, smiling with too many teeth, was Ellie. "I'm sorry, Kevin," Ellie said, her voice unchanged despite her now inhuman smile. "But we needed someone like you, someone who could see us clearly, someone who could serve as an anchor point." "Ellie, what have you done?" asked Martha, an older woman with steel-gray hair. "What needed to be done?" Ellie replied. Her face was beginning to shift now. "Our world is dying. We need somewhere else to go." The faceless man stepped forward. "The veil between worlds has grown too thin to maintain. What you perceive as an invasion is simply an inevitable merging. Your reality and ours becoming one." "And what happens to us in this merging?" Martha demanded. "Some will adapt," the thing that had been Ellie said, "like I did. The rest will not." "You're talking about the end of humanity," I said. "We're talking about evolution," the faceless man corrected. "A new kind of existence." As I watched them, I noticed something. The longer they maintained their position at the threshold, the more solid they became. And I remembered what Ellie had told me about iron disrupting them. I had a small pocket knife with an iron blade. I slipped my hand into my pocket. "You said I could serve as an anchor point," I said. "What does that mean?" "Your perception creates a bridge. Through you, we can find our way across the void. So, I'm special to you. Valuable." "Very," agreed the thing that had been Ellie. "And what about my friend Mike?" "He can choose to adapt," the faceless man said. "Or he can choose to fade." At the mention of Mike's name, something hardened inside me. "And if I choose to fight?" I asked, my hand tightening around the knife. The faceless man laughed. "Fight? With what? You cannot fight the inevitable." "Maybe not," I admitted. "But I can make it harder for you." I pulled out the knife and slashed it across my palm, then pressed my bleeding hand against the faceless man's chest. The effect was immediate. Where my blood touched him, his form solidified, becoming unmistakably physical. And in that moment of solidity, he became vulnerable. He screamed and tried to back away. "Iron and blood," I hissed, "the most basic elements of our reality." The void behind him began to fluctuate. The other entities started to retreat. "The iron!" I shouted to the others. "Use anything made of iron!" The watchers responded instantly, pulling out keys, belt buckles, tools, anything iron they had, and advancing on the remaining entities. With my free hand, I reached into the faceless man's chest and grasped something that felt like a cold, pulsing stone where a heart should have been. I pulled, and the faceless man collapsed, his form dissolving into smoke. In my hand was a small black stone that pulsed with an inner light, the anchor that connected him to our reality. The thing that had been Ellie backed toward the void. "This changes nothing," she spat. "We will find another anchor." "Maybe," Martha replied. "But it won't be today." The entity retreated into the void, which began to shrink until it was gone, leaving only a solid brick wall. Did we just win?" asked a young man with thick glasses. "Not win," Martha said. "Survive. There's a difference." I looked down at the pulsing black stone in my hand. They can be fought. They're not invincible. And now we know how. Martha nodded. Iron and blood, the elements of our world. But I couldn't accept their gratitude, not when Mike was still gone. Is there a way to get my friend back? I don't know, Kevin. But if there is, we have a better chance of finding it now. We have this. She gestured to the stone in my hand. Maybe it's a start. And so I found myself part of the Watchers, a group dedicated to understanding the Faders, to finding ways to fight them, to protecting the boundaries of our reality. The black stone became our most valuable tool. Through it, we could sense when the veil between worlds was thinning, when the Faders were attempting to cross over. It wasn't a final victory, but we had won ourselves time. Time to understand, to prepare, to find ways to survive. Even now, I sometimes catch glimpses of them out of the corner of my eye. Shifting faces, impossible angles, things that exist in the spaces between what we think of as real. And sometimes, on quiet nights, I hear Mike's voice calling to me from somewhere beyond the veil, telling me he's still there, still waiting to be found. Have you ever noticed something strange out of the corner of your eye? Something that disappeared when you tried to look at it directly? Maybe you've already seen them. Maybe they're watching you right now as you listen to this story. Don't look too hard. Don't let them know you can see them. Not unless you're ready for your reality to change forever. Because once they see them, they see you. And once they see you, well, now you know what happens then. Sleep well if you can. And maybe leave a light on tonight. Just to be safe. If you've made it to the end of this story, I have to ask, have you ever experienced anything like this? That strange feeling of being watched? Let me know in the comments. And if you want to hear what happened when I tried to rescue Mike from beyond the veil, make sure to subscribe. This is just the beginning of the story. Until next time, keep your eyes open. But not too open. Some things are better left unseen. Now sleep, if you can ignore the whisper behind your curtains, or gain the courage to check behind them. Is that only wind, or a bloody creature waiting for you to respond? Story number 3. Have you ever felt that cold tingle on the back of your neck in an empty room? That unsettling certainty that you're being watched when you're completely alone? I never believed in ghosts until I spent a weekend at the Blackwood Mansion near Lake Placid. The voice I heard there still echoes in my nightmares, whispering secrets that no living person should know. Tonight, I'm sharing my experience with you, but I have to warn you, after hearing what happened to me, you might start noticing strange things in your own home. That creak in your hallway, that whisper you barely catch. They might not be as innocent as you've always assumed. If you're brave enough to continue, make yourself comfortable, but maybe keep one light on, just in case. The story begins now. Just one weekend, Sarah. That's all I'm asking. Mike's voice crackled through my phone as I paced around my Chicago apartment. This could be our big break. I sighed, watching the city lights flicker against the night sky. An abandoned mansion in the middle of nowhere doesn't sound like an opportunity, Mike. It sounds like the beginning of a horror movie. It's not the middle of nowhere. I could hear him rolling his eyes. It's upstate New York, near Lake Placid. And it's not just any mansion, it's the Blackwood Mansion. His voice quickened with excitement. No one's been allowed inside since the Blackwood family disappeared in the winter of 1984. And that's supposed to convince me? My production company got exclusive permission to film there for my documentary series. Think about it. We could capture evidence that would blow every other paranormal investigation show out of the water. I'd known Mike since college. We both studied film, but while I became a sound engineer for a streaming service, Mike pursued his dream of producing paranormal documentaries. His YouTube channel, Spectral Explorers, had a decent following, but he was always hunting for his next big break. I need someone I trust to handle the audio. His voice softened. You're the best sound engineer I know, Sarah. I hesitated. After my breakup with Jason 3 months ago, I'd barely left my apartment except for work and groceries. Maybe a weekend away wouldn't be the worst idea. When would we leave? I asked, already knowing I was going to say yes. Tomorrow morning, early. I could hear the smile in his voice. I'll pick you up at 6. Pack warm clothes. The heating hasn't worked in that place for decades. That night, I scrolled through articles about the Blackwood Mansion on my phone. The more I read, the more unsettled I became. The Blackwood family had been prominent in New York society. Thomas Blackwood made his fortune in railroad development in the late 1800s. The family's history was stained with tragedy. Thomas's son, Edward, was institutionalized in the 1920s, claiming to hear voices throughout the house. The mansion passed through several generations until Richard Blackwood, his wife Eleanor, and their teenage daughter Lily moved in permanently in 1982. 2 years later, all three vanished without a trace during a heavy snowstorm. The case was never solved. I put my phone down, suddenly aware of how quiet my apartment was. As I drifted off to sleep, I could have sworn I heard a whisper, so faint I might have imagined it. Sarah. The next morning, I was waiting outside my building when Mike's van pulled up, plastered with the Spectral Explorers logo, a ghost holding a camera. I cringed, hoping none of my neighbors were watching. Morning, sunshine, Mike grinned as I climbed into the passenger seat. He handed me a coffee. Ready for an adventure? As we drove out of Chicago, Mike explained that the rest of his small crew would meet us at the mansion. His camera operator, Danny, and a production assistant named Tyler. The drive would take about 12 hours, with stops. So, tell me more about this place, I said as we crossed into Indiana. Why has it been closed off for so long? Mike kept his eyes on the road. After the Blackwoods disappeared, the estate went into a legal battle. By the time they sorted it out, the mansion had fallen into disrepair. The Historical Society took over about 10 years ago, but they haven't had the funding to restore it properly. And they're just letting you film there? I told them we'd document the architectural features, help raise awareness for preservation. He glanced at me with a mischievous smile. Which we will, along with hunting for ghosts. I shook my head. You're unbelievable. That's why you love me. He winked. It was almost sunset when Mike nudged me awake. We're almost there. I blinked, disoriented. We had turned onto a narrow road that wound through thick pine forests. The trees pressed close on either side, their shadows deepening as the sun sank lower. The road curved sharply, and suddenly the trees parted to reveal a clearing. And there it stood, Blackwood Mansion, silhouetted against the darkening sky. I felt my breath catch. The mansion was enormous, a looming Victorian structure with multiple turrets and chimneys. Its facade might once have been grand, but now it sagged with neglect. Vines crawled up the weathered stone walls. Many windows were boarded up, while others gaped like empty eye sockets. Home sweet home for the weekend, Mike said, pulling up to the rusted iron gates that hung partially open. As we drove through, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched from those dark windows. A chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the October air. Are Danny and Tyler already here? I asked, noticing no other vehicles. Mike frowned, checking his phone. No signal, but they should be arriving soon. We parked in what once had been a circular driveway, now overgrown with weeds pushing through cracked concrete. As I stepped out of the van, the mansion seemed to loom even larger. Let's get the equipment inside before it gets completely dark, Mike suggested. We carried our bags and the first load of equipment up the crumbling stone steps to the main entrance. Massive double doors of dark wood, carved with intricate patterns partially obscured by decades of grime. Mike pulled out an old-fashioned key. The Historical Society gave me this. said it might still work. It took some jiggling, but eventually, the lock turned with a groan that echoed through the stillness. The door swung inward on protesting hinges, revealing darkness beyond. Mike fumbled for his flashlight. The beam cut through the gloom, illuminating a vast entry hall. Dust motes danced in the light. A grand staircase curved upward to the second floor. Faded portraits hung on wood-paneled walls. A massive chandelier draped in cobwebs hung precariously from the ceiling. "Wow," I whispered, my voice sounding small in the cavernous space. Mike stepped inside, his footsteps echoing on the marble floor. "Can you believe nobody's been in here for years?" I followed hesitantly, fighting the urge to run back to the van. The air inside was stale and cold, carrying a musty scent of decay and something else I couldn't identify, something metallic and unpleasant. "Let's find the main parlor," Mike suggested. "That's where we'll set up base." We moved deeper into the house, our flashlight beams creating grotesque shadows that seemed to move independently of us. The parlor turned out to be a large room off the main hall, filled with sheet-covered furniture. Mike began removing the dusty sheets, revealing ornate Victorian sofas and chairs that seemed frozen in time. As I grabbed one end of a heavy oak table, I heard it. A faint sound, almost imperceptible. I froze. "Did you hear that?" Mike paused. "Hear what?" I thought I heard. I trailed off, listening intently, but there was nothing except the creaking of the old house. "Just the wind," Mike said dismissively. "These old places make all kinds of noises." By the time we finished arranging the room, darkness had fallen completely outside. The flashlights and a battery-powered lantern Mike had brought created a small island of light in the vast darkness of the mansion. "Danny and Tyler should have been here by now," I said, checking my own phone again. Still no signal. Maybe they got delayed. Roads can be tricky up here. Mike didn't sound worried. "They know where the key is hidden if they arrive late." After dinner, Mike set up his sleeping bag on one of the sofas. "You can take the other one," he offered, "unless you'd prefer to sleep in one of the bedrooms upstairs." "No, thanks," I said quickly. "I'm staying right here where I can see you." He chuckled. "Smart choice. But I'm going to need to use the bathroom before bed. Want to come exploring?" I hesitated. The thought of wandering through the dark mansion was terrifying, but staying alone in the parlor seemed worse. "Fine," I sighed, grabbing my flashlight. We ventured back into the entrance hall and found a narrow door that led to a powder room. As we crossed the entrance hall afterward, my flashlight beam swept across the grand staircase. And that's when I saw it. A shadow moving on the landing above us. I grabbed Mike's arm. "There's someone upstairs." Mike swung his flashlight toward the stairs, but the landing was empty. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice dropping to a whisper. "I saw something move," I insisted. "Maybe Danny and Tyler arrived while we were in the bathroom?" We checked outside, but the driveway was empty except for Mike's van. "See?" he said. "Nobody's here but us." "Then what did I see?" I demanded. Mike shrugged. "Old houses settle, shadows play tricks. Or maybe—" He wiggled his eyebrows dramatically. "Maybe you saw one of the Blackwoods." "Stop it," I snapped. Back in the parlor, I snuggled into my sleeping bag, keeping the flashlight close. Mike seemed energized by my fear, checking his cameras and voice recorders to make sure they were set up properly for the night. He turned off the lantern, leaving only the dim red lights of the recording equipment glowing in the darkness. I lay awake, listening to the sounds of the house, the creaking of old wood, the whisper of wind through cracks in the walls, the scurrying of what I hoped were just mice in the distance. Slowly, exhaustion overcame my fear, and I drifted into an uneasy sleep. I don't know how long I slept before the voice woke me. "Sarah." My eyes snapped open. The parlor was pitch black, except for the equipment lights. Mike's soft snoring came from the other sofa. "Sarah, come upstairs." The voice was faint but distinct, a woman's voice, barely above a whisper. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. I sat up, my heart pounding. "Mike," I hissed. "Mike, wake up." He grumbled in his sleep but didn't wake. "Sarah, I need to show you something." The voice was clearer now, definitely coming from somewhere upstairs. I fumbled for my flashlight with trembling hands. "Mike," I said louder, reaching over to shake him. He stirred. What's wrong?" "Someone's calling my name," I whispered frantically. "Listen." We both fell silent, straining to hear, but there was nothing except the normal sounds of the old house. "I don't hear anything," Mike said groggily. "I swear someone was calling me. A woman's voice, telling me to come upstairs." That woke him fully. He sat up, reaching for his own flashlight. "Are you serious? What exactly did it say?" I told him, watching as his face transformed from concern to excitement. "This is amazing," he breathed. "Let me check the recorders." He scrambled over to his equipment, checking the audio levels. "Something registered on the device in the upstairs hall about 3 minutes ago," he said. "Let's listen." He played back the recording. At first, there was only static, then, faintly, unmistakably, "Sarah, come upstairs." Mike's eyes widened. "It knows your name." A chill washed over me. That's not possible. How could it know my name? This is exactly what we came for. Mike was practically bouncing with excitement. "We need to go upstairs, see if we can make contact again." "Are you crazy? I'm not going up there." I pulled my sleeping bag tighter around me. "Sarah, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Think about it. Actual documented paranormal contact." I shook my head vehemently. "No way. We don't know what's up there." "Exactly." Mike was already pulling on his shoes. "Don't you want to find out?" I stared at him in disbelief. "No, I absolutely do not." But Mike was already grabbing his camera. "Fine. You stay here and I'll go." "Mike, don't..." But he was already heading for the door, camera in one hand, flashlight in the other. "I'll be right back. If I'm not down in 15 minutes, call for help." He paused. "Oh, wait, no signal. Well, come looking for me, I guess." "That's not funny," I called after him, but he was already gone, his flashlight beam disappearing into the darkness of the hall. I sat frozen on the sofa, clutching my flashlight like a lifeline. The silence of the mansion pressed in around me, broken only by the occasional creak or groan of settling wood. 5 minutes passed, then 10. I strained to hear any sound of Mike moving around upstairs, but there was nothing. Finally, unable to bear the suspense any longer, I slipped out of my sleeping bag and crept to the parlor door. The entrance hall was a cavern of shadows. I swept my flashlight across the space, half expecting to see something lurking in the corners. But it was empty. "Mike?" I called, my voice small in the vastness. "Mike, can you hear me?" No response. Summoning every ounce of courage, I stepped into the hall. The grand staircase loomed before me, its ornate banister casting spidery shadows in my flashlight beam. "Mike, this isn't funny anymore. Answer me." Still nothing. With a deep breath, I approached the stairs. Each step creaked beneath my weight as I slowly ascended, flashlight darting nervously ahead. The landing at the top branched into 3 corridors, each stretching into darkness. "Mike?" I tried again, my voice quavering. "Sarah." The whisper came from the corridor to my right. It didn't sound like Mike. It was the woman's voice again, soft and enticing. Against every instinct screaming at me to run, I turned toward the sound. My flashlight illuminated a long hallway lined with closed doors. "Sarah, in here." The voice came from behind the last door on the left. I moved toward it as if in a trance, my feet seeming to carry me forward of their own accord. As I reached for the doorknob, a loud crash from downstairs shattered the silence. I jumped, nearly dropping my flashlight. "Mike?" Another crash, followed by the sound of breaking glass. I ran back to the stairs, relief flooding through me. Mike must have gone back downstairs while I was coming up, but as I reached the landing, I froze. At the bottom of the stairs stood a figure, not Mike, someone, or something else. It was too dark to make out details, just a silhouette standing motionless in the entrance hall. "Who's there?" I called, my voice breaking with fear. The figure didn't move or respond. I raised my flashlight, but as the beam touched the spot where the figure had been, there was nothing. Just empty space. A door slammed somewhere deep in the house. Then another, closer, and another, closer still, as if something was moving rapidly through the mansion, coming toward me. Panic seized me. I turned to flee back down the corridor and collided directly with Mike. I screamed, nearly toppling backward down the stairs. Mike grabbed my arm, steadying me. "Whoa! Easy there!" His face was flushed with excitement. "You won't believe what I just saw in the master bedroom." "There's someone in the house," I gasped, clutching his arm. "I saw someone downstairs, and there were noises." "What? Where?" Mike swung his flashlight toward the entrance hall. "They were right there by the front door. And then they vanished." Mike's eyes widened. "You actually saw an apparition? What did it look like?" "I don't know. It was just a shadow, a silhouette. But Mike, it was there, I swear." "I believe you," he said, his voice filled with awe. "This place is active tonight. In the master bedroom, I saw a rocking chair moving on its own. And listen to this." He held up his digital recorder and pressed play. Through the static came a clear whisper. "Find Lily. Find what they did to Lily." I felt the blood drain from my face. "Mike, I want to leave. Now." He looked at me incredulously. "Are you kidding? This is the jackpot. We're getting actual evidence." Another crash echoed through the house, this one from upstairs, where we'd just been. "Please," I begged. "Something's not right here." Mike hesitated, torn between his excitement over the paranormal activity and concern for my obvious distress. "Okay," he relented. "Let's go back to the parlor, regroup. But Sarah, we can't leave. Not when we're getting results like this." I didn't argue. At that moment, I just wanted to get off the dark landing and back to our makeshift camp. We hurried down the stairs, Mike's hand reassuringly on my shoulder. The parlor was exactly as we'd left it, our sleeping bags rumpled on the sofas. Mike turned on the lantern, casting a warm glow that pushed back the darkness. I sank onto my sofa, trembling. "What you heard," Mike said, sitting across from me. "The voice that knew your name. That's incredible, Sarah. In all my years of paranormal investigation, I've never experienced anything like it." "Lucky me," I muttered. Mike leaned forward, his face earnest in the lantern light. "Think about it. The voice is trying to communicate something specific. Find Lily. That must refer to Lily Blackwood, the daughter who disappeared." Despite my fear, I found myself drawn into his theorizing. But what did it mean about what they did to Lily? Who are they? That's what we need to find out. Mike's eyes gleamed. Tomorrow, we should focus on Lily's room in the east turret. That's where people have reported seeing her apparition. That night, I dreamed. I was wandering through the mansion, but it was different, vibrant and alive. Gas lamps glowed warmly on the walls. The woodwork gleamed with polish. Rich carpets covered the floors. I heard piano music coming from somewhere in the house. I followed the sound to a music room I hadn't seen before. A young woman sat at a grand piano, her back to me, playing a haunting melody. Her long dark hair cascaded down her back, and she wore a white dress that seemed to glow in the dim light. "Lily?" I called softly. The music stopped. The figure at the piano turned slowly, but it wasn't a young woman at all. The face that looked back at me was decayed, the flesh hanging in tatters, the eyes empty sockets, blackened lips pulled back from yellowed teeth in a grotesque smile. "Find me, Sarah," the corpse whispered in a voice that was somehow still beautiful. "Find what they did to me. I woke with a gasp, sitting bolt upright on the sofa. The parlor was dimly lit by the lantern, which had been turned down to its lowest setting. Mike was no longer in his sleeping bag. "Mike?" I called, suddenly afraid to be alone. "Over here," came his voice from the corner of the room. He was hunched over his laptop, headphones on, reviewing footage. "What time is it?" "Almost 5 in the morning." He slipped off the headphones. "You were talking in your sleep." A chill ran through me. What did I say? I couldn't make it out, just mumbling. He studied my face. "Bad dream?" I nodded, the images still vivid in my mind. About Lily Blackwood, but she was dead, decomposed. She asked me to find her, to find out what they did to her. Mike's eyes widened. "This is getting more and more interesting. It seems like the spirits are trying to communicate something specific to you. But why me? I don't have any connection to this place or the Blackwoods." He shrugged. "Maybe you're more sensitive to spiritual energy than I am. Some people are natural mediums without realizing it." I didn't like that idea at all. "What have you been reviewing?" "The footage from the static cameras." He turned the laptop so I could see. "Look at this, from about an hour ago." On the screen was the entrance hall, dimly lit by the infrared camera. At first, I saw nothing unusual. Then, a white mist began to form at the foot of the stairs. It swirled and coalesced, gradually taking on a vaguely human shape before dissipating. "That's an actual spirit manifestation," Mike said, his voice hushed with awe. "And the EVPs we've captured are some of the clearest I've ever heard." Despite my lingering fear, I found myself leaning in to study the footage. "Have you heard anything else about Lily?" "Not specifically, but listen to this." He played another audio clip. Through the static came 3 distinct words: "In the walls." A fresh wave of unease washed over me. What's in the walls? After breakfast, we drove away from the mansion in search of cell reception. Mike finally got a signal about 15 minutes down the road and called Danny. When he hung up, his face was grim. "Tyler's appendix ruptured yesterday. They're at the hospital in Albany. He's stable, but they won't be joining us this weekend." Part of me wanted to suggest we abandon the project and leave, but something pulled me back to the mansion, to Lily, to the secrets hidden there. We returned, and in daylight the mansion felt less threatening. We decided to check the east turret, Lily's room. The narrow stairs creaked as we climbed, spiraling up into the turret. At the top was a single door, painted white but now gray with the dust and age. I pushed the door open. The room beyond was circular, with windows on 3 sides offering spectacular views of the surrounding forest. It had clearly belonged to a teenage girl. Posters of 1980s bands still clung to the walls. A canopy bed with faded pink bedding. A desk with schoolbooks still open. I moved to the desk, examining the schoolbooks. Algebra, chemistry, and English literature. Normal high school subjects. But next to them was something else. A journal bound in dark leather. My hands trembled as I picked it up. "Mike, look, Lily's journal." I carefully opened the fragile book. The pages were filled with neat handwriting. Entries dated from September 1983 through February 1984, right up until the family's disappearance. The final entry was dated February 12, 1984, 3 days before the Blackwoods vanished. "I heard it again last night," I read aloud. "The voice in the walls. Mom says it's just the house settling, but I know better. It's trying to tell me something. Dad's been acting strange lately. He spends hours in the basement, and when he comes up, he's different somehow, colder. Last night I followed him down there. What I saw, I can't even write it here. If something happens to me, look in the walls of the basement. That's where the truth is hidden." Mike and I stared at each other. "The walls," he said softly, "just like in the EVP." As I flipped back through the journal, something fell out. a small black and white photograph. I picked it up, and my blood turned to ice. The photograph showed 3 people standing in front of the mansion: a man, a woman, and a teenage girl. Richard, Eleanor, and Lily Blackwood. But what made my heart stop was the girl's face. It was my face. Lily Blackwood looked exactly like me. "We need to go to the basement," I said, my voice strangely calm despite the shock coursing through me. "Now." We made our way down to the basement and found a small chamber at the very back with a dirt floor and rough stone walls. "This is it," I whispered, though I didn't know how I knew. "This is where we need to look." Mike ran his hands along the walls, tapping occasionally. "If there's something hidden in these walls, I'm not seeing any obvious access point." I closed my eyes, trying to sense something, anything. "Lily, show me," I whispered. "Show me what they did to you." A cold breeze seemed to pass through the room, making the hairs on the back of my neck stand up, and then, as if guided by an unseen hand, I moved to the far corner of the room and pressed against a particular stone. It moved slightly. "Here," I called to Mike. "Help me with this." Together, we pushed and pulled at the stone until it came loose, revealing a small cavity behind it. Mike shone his flashlight inside. "There's something in there," he said, reaching in carefully. What he pulled out made us both gasp: a small bundle wrapped in cloth, tied with twine that had rotted with age. Inside was a locket, tarnished with age, and a folded piece of paper. "It's a letter," he said, his voice hushed. "Dated February 15th, 1984, the day the Blackwoods disappeared. If anyone finds this," Mike read, "my name is Eleanor Blackwood. By the time you read this, we will be gone. Richard has changed. The thing he found in the cave beyond our property has possessed him. It speaks through him, promises him power if he gives it what it wants. Lily, my beautiful daughter, I've tried to protect her, but I'm running out of time. Tonight, we're going to try to escape, but if we don't make it, know that the entity is still here, in this house, in these walls. It will wait for another girl, one who looks like Lily. It will call to her. If you're reading this and you hear voices, run. Run as far and as fast as you can. Don't look back." Mike lowered the letter, his face pale. "Sarah, you look just like Lily." I opened the locket with trembling fingers. Inside was a tiny photograph, the same one we'd found in the journal, of me, of Lily. "We need to leave," Mike said urgently. "Now." But it was too late. As we turned to go, the stone door to the basement room swung shut with a resounding boom, plunging us into darkness except for Mike's flashlight. "No!" Mike rushed to the door, pushing against it, but it wouldn't budge. "It's stuck!" And then the voice came again, not a woman's this time, but deep, resonant, and filled with malice. "Sarah, finally, you've come home." The flashlight flickered and died, leaving us in complete darkness. "Mike!" I screamed, reaching blindly for him. His hand found mine. "Stay close to me," he whispered. But his hand felt wrong, cold, too large, the fingers too long, and when he spoke again, it wasn't Mike's voice at all. "You look just like her." The thing that wasn't Mike said, "Just like my Lily." "But she got away. You won't—" I felt the scream building in my throat, but before it could escape, everything went black. I woke up in a hospital bed 3 days later. They told me they'd found me unconscious at the gates of Blackwood Mansion, clutching a locket and a journal. Of Mike, there was no sign. Just his van, still parked in the overgrown driveway, and his equipment inside the house, including the cameras that somehow contained no footage. The search parties found nothing. No trace of Mike, no hidden rooms in the basement, just solid stone walls all around. The authorities concluded he must have wandered into the surrounding forest and gotten lost. They're still searching, but I know they won't find him, because I know the truth. The entity that lived in the walls of Blackwood Mansion The thing that took Richard Blackwood and then tried to take Lily now has Mike. And sometimes, late at night, I can still hear his voice calling my name, begging me to come back. But I never will. Some doors, once opened, can never be closed again. Some voices once heard never stop calling, and some mansions should remain abandoned forever. I still have Lily's journal and the locket. I've read every page, studied every photo. The resemblance between us is uncanny. We could be twins, born 40 years apart. What are the chances? I don't believe it's coincidence. I believe the entity was waiting for me specifically. That somehow, across time, it knew I would come. Sometimes I think I should destroy the journal, burn it, and scatter the ashes. But I can't bring myself to do it. It's my only connection to Lily, to what happened in that house. My only proof that I'm not crazy, that what I experienced was real. And maybe, just maybe, the journal holds the key to finding Mike, to freeing him from whatever dark place now holds him captive. So I keep reading, keep searching for clues. And I keep the lights on at night, because sometimes, when my apartment is quiet, I swear I can hear scratching in my walls. So, if you're listening to this, and you ever find yourself drawn to an abandoned mansion, remember my story. Remember that some places hold secrets best left undiscovered. Some voices are best left unanswered. And if you ever hear your name being called when you're all alone, don't answer. Don't follow, just run. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that like button and subscribe for more terrifying tales. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever felt called to a place you've never been? Ever heard your name whispered when no one was there? I'd love to hear your experiences, and don't forget to turn on notifications so you'll know when my next story drops. That is, if I survive until then. Stay safe out there, and remember, not all abandoned places are truly empty. Story number 4. Hey there, fellow mystery seekers. Before I dive into tonight's tale, I want to thank you for joining me on this journey into the unknown. If you've enjoyed my previous stories, this one might just be the most chilling yet. And if you're new here, well, let's just say you picked quite the night to tune in. Tonight's story comes from the heart of Missouri, where history and the supernatural seem to dance together under moonlit skies. Make sure you're comfortable, maybe grab that extra blanket, because once we begin, I can't guarantee you'll want to get up to grab it later. And if you find yourself captivated by this tale, don't forget to like, comment your thoughts below, and subscribe for more stories that lurk in the shadows of America's most haunted locations. Now, dim those lights, and let's begin our journey to the real haunted cemetery of St. Louis. The story begins now. I never believed in ghosts. Not really. Sure, I'd get that familiar chill watching horror movies or hearing a strange noise at night, but I'd always chalked it up to an overactive imagination. That was before I spent a night in Bellefontaine Cemetery on the outskirts of St. Louis, before the whispers found me. Let me back up a bit. My name is Alex Winters, and until 3 months ago I was a typical journalism major at Washington University in St. Louis. 22 years old, with student loans piling up and dreams of breaking into investigative reporting that seemed increasingly distant with each passing semester. I needed something, anything, to set my portfolio apart from the hundreds of other hopefuls graduating this year. That's when my roommate, Devin, mentioned the podcast he'd been obsessed with lately. Grave Encounters, America's Most Haunted Cemeteries. The host, some guy named Marcus Sullivan, was hosting a contest. 5 winners would be selected to spend a night in Bellefontaine Cemetery, the oldest and supposedly most haunted burial ground in St. Louis. The resulting stories would be featured on his wildly popular show. "You should enter," Devin said, tossing me his phone with the contest page open. "You're always talking about wanting a real story. This could be your chance." I rolled my eyes. Ghost hunting? Really? That's not journalism, that's entertainment. "It's exposure," Devin countered. "And a chance to network with someone who has over 1 million subscribers. Don't be so stuck up about it." I hesitated, thumb hovering over the application form. Bellefontaine was historic, at least. Founded in 1849, it was the resting place of beer barons, Civil War generals, and some of the most influential families in St. Louis history. Even if I didn't believe the ghost stories, there was legitimate historical interest there. Fine, I said finally, but if I end up making a fool of myself on some ghost hunting podcast, I'm blaming you. 3 weeks later, an email arrived. Congratulations, you've been selected for the Bellefontaine Cemetery Challenge. Me and 4 others would spend the night of October 30th, the night before Halloween, alone in different sections of the sprawling cemetery, equipped with only basic recording equipment, a flashlight, and a sleeping bag. No phones. No contact until sunrise. I had no idea what was waiting for me among those weathered tombstones. The day of the challenge arrived faster than I expected. October in St. Louis meant unpredictable weather, and that evening was particularly fitting for a night in the cemetery, cool and misty, with low clouds obscuring the moon and stars, the kind of night where shadows seem to breathe. We met at the cemetery gates at 7 p.m. Marcus Sullivan was exactly what I expected from his podcast voice. Mid-30s, fashionably scruffy beard, plaid shirt under a leather jacket, and an enthusiastic gleam in his eyes that suggested he genuinely believed in the stories he told. Welcome to Bellefontaine, he greeted us with a broad smile that didn't quite mask the mischievous glint in his eyes. One of America's most haunted locations, and you're home for the next 12 hours. I sized up my competition. There was a goth girl who introduced herself as Raven, of course, wearing all black with a dramatic eyeliner. A middle-aged man named Tom, who claimed to be a professional paranormal investigator from Chicago. A nervous-looking college guy named Will who kept fidgeting with his watch, and a serene older woman named Eleanor who said she was a medium and had been drawn to this contest. Great. I was the only skeptic in a group of true believers. Marcus handed each of us a backpack containing our supplies and a map of the cemetery with our designated areas marked in red. Mine was in the northwestern section, near what the map labeled as Millionaires' Row, the area where the wealthiest families had their mausoleums and monuments. Remember the rules, Marcus said as we prepared to head to our separate areas. Stay in your designated zone. Use the equipment to document everything. If you absolutely need to leave before morning, use the emergency whistle. But know that you'll be disqualified from the contest. He paused dramatically. And most importantly, stay aware. The residents of Bellefontaine don't always rest easy. I resisted the urge to roll my eyes. Instead, I shouldered my backpack and nodded. See you all in the morning. As I walked away, navigating by flashlight through the growing darkness, I heard Marcus call after me. Oh, and Alex, the Lemp family mausoleum is in your section. Might want to pay special attention there. They're active. A shiver ran down my spine despite myself. Everyone in St. Louis knew about the Lemp family. Beer barons, who had once rivaled Anheuser-Busch, their family history was marked by a series of suicides so numerous and bizarre that their mansion was considered one of the most haunted buildings in America, and apparently their final resting place was in my section of the cemetery. I shook off the feeling. This was ridiculous. I was here for a story, not to chase ghosts. Still, as I made my way deeper into the cemetery, the towering oaks and maples closing in around me like silent sentinels, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The paths wound between elaborate monuments and mausoleums, some bigger than my apartment. The flashlight beam caught the solemn faces of stone angels, their eyes seeming to follow me as I passed. The mist had thickened, wreathing the gravestones and obscuring anything more than 20 feet away. After about 15 minutes of walking, I reached my designated area. It was a section where the cemetery's most ostentatious monuments stood, ornate mausoleums styled like Greek temples, towering obelisks reaching toward the hidden sky, and family plots surrounded by intricate wrought iron fences that had long since rusted. And there, at the center of it all, stood the Lemp Mausoleum. Even in the dim light, it was impressive. A small building of dark granite with Lemp engraved above the heavy bronze door. 4 stone pillars supported a triangular pediment, giving it the appearance of a miniature Greek temple. Unlike many of the other monuments, it showed no signs of neglect. The granite gleamed dully in my flashlight beam, as though recently cleaned. "Home sweet home," I muttered, my voice sounding unnaturally loud in the silence. I set up my small tent near, but not too near, the Lemp Mausoleum, arranging my sleeping bag inside and placing the digital recorder and night vision camera at strategic points. Then I settled in to wait, recording occasional observations into my voice recorder. 8:47 p.m. No unusual activity, just a lot of expensive glorified coffins and the occasional distant traffic noise from beyond the cemetery walls. 9:32 p.m. Thought I heard footsteps, but it's probably just animals. A fox, maybe, or one of St. Louis's famous raccoons coming to investigate the strange human in their territory. 10:15 p.m. Getting colder. Mist is making everything damp. Starting to regret entering this contest. Around 11 p.m., I decided to explore my section a bit more thoroughly. The initial nervousness had worn off, replaced by boredom. If I was going to be out here all night, I might as well gather some interesting historical details about the monuments. I started with the Lemp Mausoleum, walking slowly around its perimeter, noting the craftsmanship and the dates engraved on the stone. William Lemp Sr., who shot himself in 1904 after his youngest son died. William Jr., who shot himself in 1922. Charles Lemp, who shot himself in 1949, but not before shooting his dog. Elsa Lemp, who shot herself just 18 days after marrying her second husband. So many deaths. So much tragedy concentrated in one family. As I stood before the mausoleum door, a cold breeze suddenly whipped past me, far stronger than the gentle night air had been moments before. My flashlight flickered, then steadied. And in that moment of near darkness, I could have sworn I heard a whisper. "Who's there?" I called out, immediately feeling foolish. Of course, no one was there. It was just the wind in the trees, my mind playing tricks on me. But then I heard it again, clearer this time. "Help us." I froze, flashlight beam fixed on the mausoleum door. The voice had been so clear, a woman's voice, soft yet urgent. "Hello?" I called again, hating how my voice trembled slightly. "Is someone there?" Silence. Just the distant hoot of an owl and the rustle of leaves. I took a steadying breath. "Get it together, Alex," I muttered to myself. "You're letting the atmosphere get to you." I turned to walk back to my tent, but as I moved away from the mausoleum, the temperature seemed to plummet. Not the gradual chill of a cool October night, but an instant, bone-deep cold that made my teeth chatter. My breath clouded in front of my face, though it hadn't been nearly cold enough for that moments before, and the whispers came again. Not one voice now, but several, overlapping, indistinct yet somehow desperate. They seemed to surround me, coming from everywhere and nowhere all at once. "Help us! Find it, before it's too late!" I spun around, flashlight beam slashing through the mist. "Who's there? This isn't funny." Part of me was convinced it was Marcus or one of the other contestants trying to scare me to get a reaction for the podcast. But another part, a primal, instinctual part I usually ignored, knew better. I was alone among the dead, and something was trying to communicate. I hurried back to my tent, heart pounding. Once inside, I zipped the entrance closed, as if the thin nylon fabric could somehow protect me from whatever was out there. I checked the digital recorder and night vision camera, half expecting them to have malfunctioned, but both were working perfectly. 11:47 p.m. I spoke into the recorder, trying to keep my voice steady. Experienced a sudden temperature drop near the Lemp Mausoleum. Thought I heard voices. probably just the wind and an overactive imagination. Even as I said it, I knew I was lying to myself. What I'd heard hadn't been the wind, but the alternative was too unsettling to contemplate. I tried to settle into my sleeping bag, determined to get some rest despite the circumstances. I'd almost managed to convince myself to close my eyes when I heard it, the unmistakable sound of footsteps crunching on the gravel path outside my tent. Slow, deliberate footsteps circling my tent. Once, twice, 3 times, then they stopped, right outside the tent entrance. I held my breath, eyes fixed on the zippered door, waiting for I wasn't sure what, a voice calling out, the sound of the zipper being pulled down by an unseen hand. Instead, there was a soft thud, as if something had been placed or dropped just outside my tent. Long minutes passed. The footsteps didn't resume. Whoever had been outside seemed to have gone. Eventually, curiosity overcame fear. I had to know what was out there. Clutching my flashlight like a weapon, I slowly unzipped the tent door and peered out. There, on the ground directly in front of my tent, was a small, tarnished silver key. It looked antique, with an ornate design on the bow and a complex cut to the bit. It hadn't been there when I set up camp, I was certain of that. I hesitated, then reached out and picked it up. The metal was ice cold against my fingers, colder than the night air could account for. As I held it, that same whisper came again, right beside my ear. Find the door. Before dawn. I nearly dropped the key in shock, scrambling back into my tent and zipping it closed. My heart hammered in my chest, and I found myself speaking into the recorder again, as much to calm myself as to document what was happening. 12:34 a.m. Found a key outside my tent. Old-fashioned, silver. No idea where it came from or what it opens. Continuing to hear voices. I paused, then added, I know how this sounds. I'm not prone to flights of fancy. I'm a journalism major, for crying out loud. I deal in facts. But something is happening here that I can't explain. I examined the key in my flashlight beam. There were initials engraved on it. EWL. Elsa Wilhelmina Lemp. Elsa Lemp, the only daughter of William Lemp Sr., known as the Lady of Sorrows. Her suicide in 1920 was just one in the string of family tragedies. Despite every instinct screaming to stay in my tent, I had to find out what the key opened. The journalist in me wouldn't let me ignore this mystery. I gathered my equipment and stepped into the night again. The mist had thickened until my flashlight barely penetrated a few feet ahead. Monuments loomed like specters, their features distorted in the gloom. I made my way back to the Lemp mausoleum, drawn there by an instinct I couldn't explain. The key had Elsa's initials. Her body rested in that stone building. It seemed logical to start there. I noticed something I'd missed before. To the right of the main mausoleum door, partially hidden by an overgrown bush, was a smaller bronze door set into the side of the structure, only about 3 feet high. I knelt down and examined it. The keyhole looked like it might match the key I'd found. With trembling fingers, I inserted the key. It slid in perfectly, and when I turned it, a heavy click echoed as the lock released. The door swung inward, revealing darkness beyond. I hesitated. Entering a mausoleum at night, alone, with a mysteriously appearing key. Every horror movie warned against this, but the whispers came again, more insistent now. Hurry, find it, before it wakes. I took a deep breath and shone my flashlight into the opening. There were stone steps leading down into darkness, not up into the mausoleum proper, but down beneath it. A hidden chamber, unknown to the cemetery visitors and possibly even to the caretakers. This is insane, I muttered, but I was already ducking through the doorway, careful not to hit my head on the low entrance. The steps were steep and narrow, spiraling down farther than I would have expected. The air grew colder with each step, and the whispers seemed to intensify, though I still couldn't make out most of what they were saying. Just urgency, desperation, fear. After what felt like dozens of steps, I reached the bottom. My flashlight revealed a small circular chamber hewn from bedrock. The walls were lined with niches containing urns and small boxes, reliquaries of some kind. But what dominated the room was a stone altar in the center, upon which rested a large leather-bound book. I approached cautiously. The book was ancient, its leather binding cracked and faded. There was no title on the cover, just a strange symbol embossed in tarnished gold, a triangle with an eye at its center, surrounded by what looked like stylized flames. "Open it," the whispers urged. "Read the truth." I reached out, my hand hovering over the book. This felt important, momentous, like I was standing on the threshold of something much bigger than a podcast contest or a night in a cemetery. I opened the book. The pages were yellowed, the ink faded to a rusty brown that looked unsettlingly like dried blood. The handwriting was elaborate and old-fashioned, but as I began to read, the words seemed to sharpen, becoming clearer as if the book wanted me to understand. It was William Lemp, Senior SS Private Journal, dated from 1875 to 1904, the year he took his own life. What I discovered chilled me far more than any ghostly whisper ever could. The Lemp family's success hadn't been built solely on hard work and business acumen as the history books claimed. According to William's journal, the original brewery had been failing in the 1870s, unable to compete with larger operations. In desperation, William had turned to alternative methods to save his family's business. He wrote of midnight meetings with a stranger who called himself Mr. Graves, of rituals performed in the brewery cellars, of a pact signed in blood that guaranteed wealth and success beyond his wildest dreams, for a price. Mr. Graves assured me that the fee would not come due in my lifetime, one entry read. That my children and their children would prosper for generations. I was a fool. I did not read the fine print, as they say. The wealth came, yes, but so did the darkness. Later entries became increasingly disturbed. William wrote of hearing whispers when he was alone, of glimpsing shadows that moved independently of any light source, of waking to find himself standing in front of mirrors, his reflection smiling back at him when he himself was not smiling. "It is in the blood now," he wrote in 1890. "I see it in Frederick's eyes sometimes, a momentary darkness, a void where my son should be. Elizabeth, too, though she fights it harder. Only Elsa seems immune, my sweet, sad Elsa, with her mother's eyes and her mother's gift of sight." I turned page after page, reading William's increasingly frantic entries as the darkness he described began to claim his family one by one. His despair when his son Frederick died under mysterious circumstances in 1901, officially attributed to health issues but described in the journal as the darkness taking him completely. The final entries were nearly illegible, the handwriting deteriorating along with William's mental state. But one passage, dated just days before his suicide, stood out with terrible clarity. "Elsa knows. God help me, she has discovered the truth. Found this very journal, perhaps. She came to me today with such accusation in her eyes. 'What have you done, Father?' she asked me. 'What have you brought upon us?' I could not answer her, could not bear the judgment in her gaze. But she is working against it now. My brave Elsa. She believes she has found a way to break the pact, to free us from Mr. Graves's claim. I fear it is too late for me. The darkness presses close. The whispers will not cease, but perhaps she can save the others." The journal ended there. William Lemp Sr. had shot himself 2 days later. I sat back on my heels, trying to process what I'd just read. It was fantastical, impossible, the ramblings of a man descending into madness. It had to be. And yet, the whispers, the key with Elsa's initials, the hidden chamber beneath a mausoleum that shouldn't exist. "Now you understand," came a clearer whisper. directly behind me. I whirled around, nearly dropping my flashlight. There, at the foot of the stairs, stood a translucent figure of a woman in early 20th century clothing. Her face was solemn, beautiful in a melancholy way, with large, sad eyes that seemed to hold the weight of decades of sorrow. I couldn't speak, couldn't move. Every skeptical bone in my body screamed that this was impossible, yet I couldn't deny the evidence of my own eyes. "I am Elsa," the apparition said, her voice echoing strangely as if coming from very far away, "and you are running out of time." My voice returned, though it emerged as barely more than a whisper. Time for what? To break the cycle, the pact that my father made. Mr. Graves is not a man, but something older, hungrier. It has fed on my family for generations, driving us to despair, to self-destruction, and it will continue to feed until the pact is broken. "But how?" I managed to ask, still struggling to accept that I was having a conversation with a ghost. "How do I break it?" "The same way I tried to," Elsa's ghost replied, "with the truth. The darkness thrives in secrecy, in shame, in hidden sins. Expose it to the light. Tell our true story, not just the suicides and the scandals, but the cause behind them." She gestured to the journal. "Take it, show the world. Break the silence that has protected this thing for over a century." I looked down at the journal, then back at Elsa's ghost. "Why me? Why now?" "Because you were open enough to hear us, because the 100-year mark of the pact approaches, and the darkness grows stronger, because it will soon reach beyond the Lemp bloodline to claim new victims." Her form flickered, like a television losing reception. "It stirs even now. Can you feel it?" And I could. The air in the chamber had grown heavier, thicker, as if something was pressing down from all sides. The whispers had changed too, no longer Elsa's voice or the voices of other Lemp family members, but something else, something that spoke in a language I couldn't understand, but that filled me with instinctual dread. "Take the book," Elsa urged, her form growing fainter. "Leave this place. Tell our story. Break the pact before—" Her warning was cut off as the chamber plunged into total darkness. My flashlight died without warning or flickering, leaving me in a blackness so complete it felt solid. The air grew colder still, cold enough that breathing hurt my lungs, and the new whispers grew louder, surrounding me, pressing in from all sides. Something was in the chamber with me, something ancient and hungry and malevolent. Mr. Graves had come to collect his due. Panic surged through me, sharp and electric. I clutched the journal to my chest with one hand, while my other frantically shook the useless flashlight. The darkness was absolute, a living thing that pressed against my eyes and filled my mouth when I tried to breathe. The whispers became a chorus, a cacophony of voices speaking in that terrible unknown language that somehow conveyed meaning, despite my inability to understand the words. Hunger, anticipation, cruel amusement. I stumbled backward, desperate to find the stairs, but my orientation was gone in the perfect blackness. My back hit stone, a wall, not the staircase. I began to edge along it, one hand trailing against the rough surface while the other still clutched the journal. "Left, go left." Elsa's voice, barely audible beneath the malevolent chorus, but clear enough to guide me. I followed her instruction, moving left until my fingers found empty space, the staircase. Relief was short-lived. As I placed my foot on the first step, something cold wrapped around my ankle. Like smoke given substance, like solidified shadow. It pulled hard, and I crashed onto the stone floor, the journal flying from my grasp. "No!" I cried, scrabbling desperately to find it. My fingers brushed leather, and I seized the book just as the smoky tendril began dragging me back toward the altar. More tendrils wrapped around my legs, waist, and throat, cold and tightening. The whispers deafened me, drowning my gasps. In that moment of pure terror, with darkness pressing in and unseen forces pulling me towards some unimaginable fate. Something shifted inside me. Fear gave way to a different emotion, anger. Not just at whatever supernatural entity was attacking me, but at the entire situation. At William Lemp for making a devil's bargain that condemned his family. At the decades of silence that had allowed this thing to feed on generation after generation. "Enough!" I shouted into the darkness. "You've taken enough. The Lemps, the truth, all of it. It comes to light now." I clutched the journal tighter and began to recite from memory the words I'd just read. William's confession, the details of the pact, the truth that had been hidden for over a century. My voice was shaky at first but grew stronger with each word, filling the chamber and momentarily drowning out the malevolent whispers. The pressure around my throat eased slightly. The tendrils holding my legs loosened just enough for me to twist free and lunge toward where I remembered the stairs to be. My shoulder hit the first step hard enough to bruise, but I barely felt the pain. I scrambled upward on hands and knees, still clutching the journal, still reciting William Lemp's words as loudly as I could. Behind me, the whispers changed in tone, from confident and hungry to uncertain, then angry. The temperature dropped even further, cold enough that I felt my skin burning with it, my lungs seizing with each breath. But I kept climbing, kept speaking the truth aloud. "Almost there," Elsa's voice encouraged, somewhere ahead of me. "Don't stop. Don't look back." I reached the small door, fumbling in the darkness to find the opening. Something grabbed at my ankle again. One last desperate attempt to pull me back into the depths. I kicked out wildly and connected with nothing but air, yet the pressure released. I tumbled through the doorway and out into the night, gasping in the cool cemetery air that suddenly felt warm compared to the chamber below. The door slammed shut behind me with a finality that echoed through the quiet cemetery. My flashlight flickered back to life, illuminating the mist-shrouded gravestones around me. The world seemed suddenly, blessedly normal again. Just a cemetery at night, silent except for the distant hoot of an owl and the gentle rustle of leaves in the breeze. But the journal in my hands was real, and when I looked back at the small door set into the side of the Lemp mausoleum, I saw that the keyhole was gone, the metal smooth and unbroken as if the lock had never existed. I stumbled back to my tent on shaking legs, collapsed inside, and spoke breathlessly into my digital recorder. 3:17 a.m. Found a journal. William Lemp, Senior S. Private Journal. It explains everything. The suicides, the family curse, all of it. Something supernatural is at work here. Something that's fed on the Lemp family for generations. And it's real. God help me, it's real. I spent the rest of the night huddled in my sleeping bag, the journal clutched to my chest, jumping at every sound outside my tent. But nothing came for me again. When dawn finally broke, pale light filtering through the mist and the thin fabric of my tent, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. I had survived the night. I had the journal. I could tell the story. Marcus, Sullivan, and the other contestants found me sitting outside my tent, the leather-bound book open on my lap as I read through it again in the clear light of morning. I must have looked like hell, pale, disheveled, with dark circles under my eyes and the occasional full-body shiver that I couldn't quite control. "Rough night?" Marcus asked with a raised eyebrow. I looked up at him, then at the other contestants who all seemed far less affected by their night in the cemetery. Had they experienced nothing? Or had whatever dwelled beneath the Lemp mausoleum focused its attention solely on me? "You could say that," I replied, my voice hoarse from shouting. I held up the journal, but I found something that changes everything we know about the Lemp family. Marcus's expression shifted from mild amusement to genuine interest. "What is that?" "William Lemp's private journal, hidden in a chamber beneath the family mausoleum." I stood up, suddenly energized despite my exhaustion. And it contains the true story of what happened to the Lemps. Not just a series of unrelated suicides or a family curse in the abstract sense, but a specific supernatural entity that has haunted them for generations. The real reason behind the tragedies. I expected skepticism, disbelief. Instead, Marcus's face paled slightly as he glanced from me to the journal and back again. "You found it," he said quietly. "She led you to it." "She?" I echoed, though I already knew. "Elsa Lemp," Marcus replied. "The Lady of Sorrows, the only one who fought back." I stared at him. "You knew about all of this?" He nodded slowly. "Not everything, not the details, but enough to organize this contest, to try to find someone who might be receptive. Someone who might hear them." "Hear the whispers," I said, understanding dawning. "Yes. The Lemps have been trying to tell their story for decades, but few people can hear them clearly. Fewer still are willing to listen." He held out his hand. "May I?" I hesitated, then handed him the journal. He opened it reverently, flipping through a few pages before looking back at me with new respect in his eyes. "This changes everything," he said. "Are you ready for that? For what it means to bring this to light?" And I thought about the thing in the darkness beneath the mausoleum, about the cold tendrils that had tried to drag me back, to silence me as it had silenced so many Lemps over the decades, about Elsa's sad eyes and her desperate plea. "Tell our story. Break the pact." "Yes," I said firmly, "I'm ready." And I was, ready to tell the true story of the Lemp family and the darkness that had claimed them. Ready to break the silence that had protected an ancient evil for over a century. Ready to honor Elsa's final wish and perhaps, in doing so, to set her family's restless spirits free at last. As we walked out of Bellefontaine Cemetery into the bright morning sunlight, the journal safe in my backpack, I felt a gentle breeze brush past me. Cooler than the surrounding air, but not the bone-deep cold of the malevolent presence. A whisper reached my ears, faint but distinct. "Thank you." Elsa Lemp, the Lady of Sorrows, was finally being heard. And there you have it, friends. The real story behind one of St. Louis's most haunted locations. A tale of dark pacts, family curses, and the courage to face the truth no matter how terrifying. Since that night in Bellefontaine Cemetery, I've dedicated myself to researching the Lemp family history, corroborating what I can of William's journal with historical records. Some call me obsessed. Maybe I am. But sometimes obsession is the price of truth. And some stories demand to be told, no matter how many generations they've waited in the darkness. If you're ever in St. Louis, you might want to visit Bellefontaine Cemetery. Pay your respects to the Lemps, but I wouldn't recommend going at night. And if you hear whispers among the tombstones, listen carefully, but whatever you do, don't follow them down. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video, leave a comment with your own cemetery experiences, and don't forget to subscribe for more tales from America's most haunted places. And if you have any questions about the Lemp family or Bellefontaine Cemetery, drop them below. I've become something of an expert on the subject these days. Sleep well tonight, friends, and remember, sometimes the whispers in the dark are trying to tell us something important. The question is, are we brave enough to listen? Listen the whispers and make a decision whether we are going to cooperate with the whispers or we just want to skip them. But actually, no one can skip these whispers. If you walk away from them, they will run towards you until they reach you. They confront you, make you pay, make you suffer the same thing they suffer. There is no escape from them. If you want to escape, help them, so they can have peace, and you also can have it. Help, or you will ask for help soon. So, the end of today's video has arrived. Share your personal horror experiences in the comments. Also, Comment the part of the story that you find the most horror and terrifying. If you like this video, leave a like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Also, ring the bell icon so you don't miss the upcoming videos. Remember, don't run from whispers, because they follow you. They know you. They want you to listen, just confront them. Now, sleep well, or should I say, have a haunted night.